Every day, as the light retreats, my soldiers come out. The bravest young men and women I've ever known. Protecting our city, protecting other cities. An outcome that I could never have dreamed of when I started, because I had no dreams. I couldn't afford to. Today on the Comic Book Report, Chip Zdarsky's Batman Failsafe. Stick around and check it out. Greetings from Gotham, everyone. My name is Dominic, and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today, I cannot wait to talk to you about the beginning of the Chip Zdarsky Batman run with Batman Failsafe. But before we do, if you're interested in getting your own copy, I encourage you to check out our channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. You can use my code, TheComicBookReport, at checkout to receive $2 off of your order today. Please note, if you use my affiliate code or link to make a purchase, I will receive a small commission, but it's a great way to support our channel at no additional cost to you. Thank you for considering. Now let's get started with today's review. First, some quick facts about today's collection. The issues in this volume were written by Chip Zdarsky and illustrated by Jorge Jimenez. The issues in this volume were published by DC Comics beginning in 2022. The volume itself collects Batman issues 125 through 130, and finally, this standard size hardcover edition comes in at 224 pages. At this time, I'd like to issue a general spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the contents of today's collection and commenting on plot points throughout. You've been advised. Okay, and here we have it, our first look at that Batman hardcover collection from Chip Zdarsky and Jorge Jimenez. This is a standard size hardcover edition with matte print paper stock and a glued binding, which I'll show you momentarily. Unfortunately, the glossiness and glare that the camera's picking up do not do this cover justice. The dust jacket is absolutely gorgeous. Love that striking kind of shadowed Batman image with the excellent Robin kind of reaching out, looking like the Bat logo on his chest. A gorgeous cover design. Really like this collection. Interestingly enough, they are calling this a Volume 1. I only find this surprising because reading Batman Abyss by Joshua Williamson was considered a Volume 6 and not his own Volume 1. So I'm not clear what they're doing with that. Maybe this is the launch of a new era for Batman. I'm not really certain, but again, they're calling it a Volume 1. Before we take a look at the binding, I do want to also just do another quick look at this dust jacket along with the interior flaps before showing off some of the under the dust jacket artwork featured on this hardcover collection. I've said it before in past videos, I love that we're in an era where so many of these hardcover books have their own under the dust jacket art on the hardback itself. I feel like this is an almost added bonus feature because when I first started collecting comic book hardcovers, they were usually just straight up black hardbacked volumes, no artwork, and I just think it's a great way to showcase some of the additional great work on the book. So let me just show you all the sides of this hardback book before I give you a spread to get you an idea of what this book looks like without the dust jacket on. Really just exceptional. We have the Bruce Wayne Batman and the Tim Drake Robin, who is the Robin featured in this collection, much to my surprise. This really is a beautifully made little collection. I was so eager to check out this run, and I'm happy to say I enjoyed my read. Now that we're done looking at the exteriors, I want to give you a quick shot of that binding. Like I mentioned, it is a glued binding. I know there is a little bit of gutter loss here, but it was nothing that dissuaded me from picking this up. I didn't find it to be too bad. This to me is fairly standard for a lot of these books. Okay, and with that taken care of, we can dive into the collection proper. The book begins with its traditional front matter. We have a title page, publication info, things like that, before diving into the issues proper. And let me tell you, this storyline was a trip. I absolutely enjoyed it. I've become a very rapidly growing Zdarsky fan after really loving what I've read of his run on Daredevil, as well as his run on Howard the Duck. I'm actually currently reading his Marvel 2-in-1 title, which is kind of his Fantastic Four stories. Really enjoying those. I'll definitely do a review on that sometime in the coming weeks. But anyway, I'm becoming a very big Zdarsky fan. When I heard he was jumping on Batman, I was absolutely absolutely ecstatic to give it a read, and I was really not disappointed. The art in this volume is predominantly provided by Jorge Jimenez, which has already become a Batman staple artist for me. I love his character design work. The immersion I get from reading his stories is in some ways unparalleled to me in the industry. I really just love him as a Batman artist, so to team him up with another great writer, very, very excited for what we had here. As far as the storyline goes, or synopsis for Batman Failsafe, essentially this starts off, I'm not really sure on the timeline of this story. I don't know if this is set sometime in the past or if it's, modern DC. Again, the Robin we have throughout this is the Tim Drake Robin, which I was surprised to see. But wherever it's set, it is a really incredible story where essentially Batman is trying to take down the Penguin, who's had his new plot to try to take over the city or kind of try to murder a bunch of people. So Batman and Tim Drake are on the hunt for Penguin. They encounter him, they encounter Clayface, and they get into all sorts of battles and situations. But ultimately, the confrontation comes to a head where we find Penguin dying in a hospital room. Batman wants to confront him, and Penguin basically swallows a cyanide capsule. Someone bursts into the Penguin's room to see Batman over the dead body of the Penguin before he flees, basically leading everyone to assume that Batman has killed the Penguin. This is, of course, very bad news for Batman, but of course, bad goes to worse as we find out that after it's reported that Batman has murdered the Penguin, deep within the reaches of the Batcave, a system comes online called Failsafe, which is sort of a Batman Terminator-like robot who is designed to take down Batman and any of his allies at all cost, should he ever basically, snap or go across lines that Batman is never meant to cross, which in this case is the reported death of the Penguin, allegedly at the hands of Batman. From this point, it basically becomes Batman and Robin trying to fight down this killer robot. This robot is designed with some, I think, Amazo tech, so it knows all the moves of all of these different fighters. It's insanely well programmed. It even has access to things like kryptonite, and so it not only can take down Batman and the Bat family, but most of the Justice League. This story also calls back to Batman during the Tower of Babel Justice League storyline, where Batman basically plans on how to take down all the members of the Justice League should a contingency or fail-safe plan ever be necessary. So we see this as an extension of an already kind of defined Batman premise, which is that Batman has planned for everything, and he has ways of taking down everyone, including himself. So throughout the first few issues of this story arc, we really do have Batman and his whole crew trying to fight off this horrible failsafe robot. I do really like seeing this kind of storytelling. It's a ton of action, but it really speaks to the kind of psychology and arguable psychosis of Batman, who is so paranoid that he has to be, paranoid or prepared for any eventuality that he has to construct something like this. Interestingly enough, though, Batman has no memory of creating the failsafe, which leads to one of my favorite surprise twists in this entire volume. Again, I did do a spoiler warning, but just as a heads up, this is revealed sometime in the first few issues, but essentially the reason why Batman has no memory of creating the failsafe is because the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh was actually the Batman who created the failsafe before having all the memory wiped. For those that maybe haven't read the Grant Morrison Batman era, or particularly Batman R.I.P., Batman of Zur-En-Arrh was basically redefined to be a version of Batman when he's been mentally or psychologically compromised. It's essentially a pure Batman personality with no Bruce Wayne that can basically function in his body as a kind of Batman if he's just completely compromised. I love that Zdarsky called back to the Morrison era. Batman R.I.P. was a beloved storyline for many, including myself, and I love the idea that basically Batman Zur-En-Arrh, which already was a kind of psychological failsafe, was used to then create this cybernetic failsafe machine. I really loved that. It was really fun having an appearance of that Batman and having that Batman come at odds with the other main Bruce Wayne Batman personality type. What a fun cameo. What a fun story device. I absolutely adored that. Very surprising, and a really, in my mind, reasonable origin for this failsafe robot. I thought it was really masterfully done by Zdarsky, drawing from some of the more modern classic Batman mythology here. Before we continue, real quick, if you're enjoying this comic book review and would love to see more from me, please consider subscribing to my channel. I'd love to have you. Thank you for considering. Now back to the review. At any rate, most of the central conflict for the Failsafe is Batman trying to take down this killer robot. Again, because of the Amazotech and how this thing was programmed, knowing that Batman knows the weaknesses of all of his main crew, allies, and himself, all the fighting techniques and everything, this robot proves to be more than a challenge for all of Batman's heroes, friends, and the Cape Crusader himself. Not only is Batman almost neutralized right from the beginning, when all of the rest of the Batman family is called in, like Nightwing and Spoiler and all of these other Bat characters, they are all quickly, taken out or otherwise incapacitated. They eventually again call the Justice League in, but this robot proves even a danger to them. One of my favorite sequences in this story arc as well is when Superman shows up to try to save the day. The Failsafe robot almost immediately takes out basically kryptonite knives and stabs Superman. Such a brutal scene, and it's such a heartrending moment because Superman's there just to save his best friend. There's a moment where Batman and Superman are basically totally incapacitated on the ground, and Batman crawls over to rip the kryptonite sword out of Superman, and it's just a really brutal moment, but it just shows this level of friendship. Batman is really heartbroken because he feels totally responsible for the creation of this robot, even if he can't remember doing it. Anyway, it's just really epic. Ultimately, Batman, Tim Drake Robin, and Superman fly back to the Fortress of Solitude, and Batman gives strict instructions to Tim to basically take Superman there so that his healing could be facilitated by everything in the fortress. Batman reasons that this robot is ultimately trying to get him, so he bails out of a moving airplane to perform a water landing. He's taken in by Aquaman, who tries to nurse his healing wounds before Failsafe ultimately tries to break into Atlantis. Epic battles ensue. Ultimately, Batman ends up teleported into space in the Watchtower, where he has an epic conflict with the Failsafe robot before Batman has to execute, in my opinion, one of his craziest moves in his entire history, which is Batman straight up falls from space back to Earth with nothing but basically a bat suit and oxygen and survives. It is absolutely incredible, and in the best way of suspension of disbelief for comic book logic, I loved it. This was pure octane action, such an amazing sequence. I would love to see like an animated adaptation of this run. I think it would be phenomenal, and that moment might be a crowning achievement for just epicness on a Batman scale. Really loved it. There's ultimately a final fight at the fortress area with Failsafe. Robin and Batman try to team up for one final fight with the robot before Batman basically takes a bullet for Tim Drake. We find Batman incapacitated on an unmarked street, and the Failsafe robot is defeated. After that, the collection basically transitions into what I think are the backup stories for those Batman issues. We have a couple stories that follow Catwoman and her exploits during this period of the Failsafe issues. We find an actually still alive Penguin who has escaped from Gotham City and made his way to Metropolis. And we also have some backup issues or backup stories at the end of this collection that deal with the Batman of Zur-En-Arrh. Some really cool backup stories. I do wish we got more in the primary Zdarsky arc, but still fun to see these stories. Again, I'm assuming because I don't see any other issues listed that these were the backup stories at the back of the issues 125 through 130. If I'm incorrect about that, please let me know in the comments. I was definitely surprised to see stories after the main story, for lack of a better way to say that. But they were fun. They were great inclusions, and again, within this world and tying into that central Failsafe narrative in their way, it really helped deepen the universe for me and broaden the scope of this story arc. I really did enjoy it. A really nice collection, and at 224 pages, it is a little bit longer than some other just volume 1 hardcovers, and I appreciated that. Switching over to the art now from Jorge Jimenez for the main story in those 5 or 6 issues. Again, I said it at the top, but he has become one of my favorite modern Batman artists of all time. The way this guy can dress a scene and convey action, and just the way he defines the character models of some of my favorite Gotham heroes and villains, it's just outstanding. There's a kind of realism to his artwork. It's not as cartoony as some modern Batman styles. Really, really love that. I think that there is a just crisp amount of detail. And again, with this story arc in Failsafe, we see a bunch of Batman's fellow heroes, his allies in the Justice League, all of his Bat family just about. And so to see Jorge Jimenez tackle all of these mainstream characters, it was just a real joy. The art in the backup stories, or what I'm assuming are the backup stories, are different artists, and their styles were really good as well. Definitely noticeably different from Jimenez, but still really great in their own right. And I do like that we get a little bit of diversity in some of the artwork throughout the collection when you include those backup stories. One small downside, we don't have a ton of extras in this collection. It looks like we're given the cover art gallery, but they're sort of not full pages. It's like 2 to a page landscape. Didn't really love that. I would have at least preferred to get them all as actual pages for each cover in the extras, but still nice to see. Still happy we got something, and we got a final solicitation of some other Batman books. And that really rounds out the collection. Got some cool end page detailing there. But that's it. That is Batman Failsafe, the first volume of Zdarsky's run. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Now let's give it a grade. For some high-octane action coupled with some of the most beautiful Batman pencil work in the modern age, the Comic Book Report is happy to give Batman Failsafe by Chip Zdarsky and Jorge Jimenez a B+. There were some moments where Zdarsky pushed the envelope, but I loved the twists and turns and the way he drew from so much within Batman canon. This is really a fun adventure story that went for more action than mystery, which lent a sense of variety in my Batman bookshelf. I love the exploration of Batman's psychology and inner workings, and overall it was presented in such a fun and gripping way. An absolute page-turner and a fun recommendation I'd give to any ongoing Batman fan out there. But let me know what you think of Zdarsky's Batman in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the Comic Book Report. If you haven't yet, please give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and maybe check out some of my other videos. Until next time, have a good one.